Guest today. We have Dr. Mallika Sarabhai. She's a dancer, she's a choreographer, she's an actress, writer, and most importantly, I think she's a social activist who has really made through that through dance and various other forms of art, a message is sent across. Thank you so much, Dr. Mallika, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you. The first thing, I mean, the amount of work which you've done and, the messaging which you've, put across through dance, we're going to be talking about that. But tell me, we do know, Mallika, that art is a common language that connects us all. And you have experimented with all, whether it's dance, theater, music. What, according to you, is the best thing about art as a medium to connect people?
If you look at India or any of the other ancient cultures, art was never a thing apart from living. It was a reflection of life. It was a reflection of what you were going through. It was a reflection of the work you did. It was a reflection of the life passages of marriage and birth and death. And it's only, I think, in the last 250, 300 years that we see it as entertainment. And that's what communicates, because it's from the heart. It reflects personal experience, but it also plugs into the experience of humanity. And I think that's why it goes beyond language.
Dr. Mallika, you have been a strong advocate for women's empowerment. You've been doing some credible work for decades now, and you use a lot of mythology. Tell us about the use of art to bring about social change. I mean, how does it, affect and bring that strong messaging?
The Hindus of this country have lived with our myths in a very day-to-day way. Today it might be different, but certainly when I was growing up and when my children were growing up, if there was a fat and very strong boy in class, they would say, "Dekho, Bhim jaisa hai." Or, references like that. So it's not like we had to go to a temple and go into the myths. The myths are all around us, whether it was in Bollywood versions or anything. And look at Hinduism, look at the way gods were addressed. It's Sita Ram, it's not Ram Sita. It's Radha Kishan, Radha's Krishna. It's Lakshmi Kanta, Lakshmi's husband. So where did this association of a man as a woman's person get tilted by patriarchy? And where did the women get reduced to these black and white convenient figures that you could oppress other women in current times? I thought I really need to come out and use mythology to peel away the patriarchy.
Again, just, I want to ask you, we are going to be talking a lot about dance and, what Darpana does. I want to ask you something which we want to focus on is self-care, especially for women. How important is it? And when women mostly take charge of the house, they prioritize their family, kids, husband, their own work. How important is self-care, especially when we're talking about physical well-being, mental health? And what larger impact does it have, especially not only on her, but also people around her?
I'll start off by telling you an experiment that I've been doing in Darpana over the last 10, 12 years, which is that I would come back from my office across the street to Darpana, and I would see all these mothers sitting outside with their daughters inside or their sons inside. And one day I just stopped and I said, "How many of you want to learn how to dance?" And they'd say, "Oh, Ben, it's too late, And I said, "Too late for what?" And then they came out and said, "Oh, I always wanted to learn and I never did. My parents wouldn't allow it, or I got married very early." So I said, come and learn, because I want you to have the joy of having something for yourself. These women who find themselves at the age of 40, 50, 60, we've just had 3 graduates over 60, and their families are transformed because they come and say, The husband says, I didn't know this was my wife. I am seeing a completely new person. And we have children, grown-up children calling from Australia and America saying, just make sure that our mother doesn't give up because we will pay for it, we will come and we will, because she's somebody completely different.
Wow.
And the way the women blossom, it brings tears to my eyes just to talk about it. And that's the importance of self-care. Women spend all their lives in this stupid society of ours being asked to be dutiful and sacrificial.
Yeah.
We are not the sacrificial lamb. And the more we are happy within ourselves, the more joy and care we give others. Otherwise, it becomes a duty. Otherwise, we are doing it with gritted teeth. Be daring, try it, look after yourself. It's not selfishness. Because we
I mean,
have
that
only
guilt. Somewhere, Mallika, that guilt, that I'm taking out that 1 hour for myself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, you have the time to go for a facial, really? That kind of thing and yet it's fulfillment and a sense of feeling well and well-being that spreads joy in the family and to everybody around us, not a feeling of being tired all the time or being yelled at by the husband or being exploited by the children. I think it's crucial.
I think you've just hit you hit the nail. It's absolutely, I think if you're happy, you can spread that happiness. That it's so important to take out that little me time, or just to relax and do what you want to do. So I mean, you experimented it, you saw it with the ladies, which you started to dance after years. I mean, that's just amazing. Also, Mallika, you've been working on gender equality, female infanticide, sexual violence for decades. We've all started talking about it now more because we realize it, we see it a lot more. Tell us about the shift you're seeing related to violence against women when I talk about today.
I think there's much more violence against women today because the general levels of the violence we see, the violence we condone, the gender and caste violence mix that affects women, and the many Me Too crimes that happen. So you don't only rape, but you rape and kill. There is much more abusive language. The internet is full of abuses and women in public life or women in the media get it all the time. So there's much more because there are many more forms of violence. There are many more platforms for violence. Also, there is very little shame. What has changed is that women are more willing to talk about it. Women are more willing to discuss it, and there are more fora available today to actually say, I am not a victim, I want to be a survivor. Rape is not because something I did, it was a violence done on me, it was an invasion of my privacy, and I demand justice. I think that is the shift. The shift that actually needs to be done is to work on men so that they don't feel threatened and they do not take women first as women and much later as human beings. So we as women who have had children or who are about to have children need to make the shift into not thinking in girl-boy terms or Hindu-Muslim terms or any of those binaries, but to try and make our children into more humane beings. I think then the shift will happen. The gender levels of violence, of all forms of violence, are much heavier today.
Yeah, and I think the shift needs to start early, and it needs to start with a boy, girl. And you're right. I mean, the boys need to be taught from an early age. Sensitization needs to happen.
That it's okay to cry. It's okay not to be sturdy and the he-man, Mard bano are probably the most dangerous words in any language.
So breaking the stereotypes again, like when we see women today doing stuff out there, what we always thought men would do. I think that similar for the men as well. I think, like you said, just another thing, since we're talking about women, the taboos, we were talking about teaching men. When we again talk about gender bias, violence against women, when we look at women's health, especially menstruation, or even for that matter, menopause, these things are never spoken about. And menstruation is still a taboo. Like in some parts of a country, it's celebrated when a woman gets her period. But whereas in some, she's just ostracized. In the sense, what do you think? Like, why does it still exist in our parts of the country?
A woman menstruating is the most powerful symbol of a race going on. If a woman doesn't menstruate, that race will die. If a woman menstruates, that woman can give birth, and therefore the human race or the tiger race continues. And that is a very frightening aspect to men. And that is why if you see all the things that are attached to being feminine are made out to be weak or dirty. menstruation is dirty. And yet, if women didn't menstruate, no humanity.
True.
We need to break these myths open. Also, that the woman's menstruating blood has more stem cells than any other blood and can save more lives, which is why a lot of Europe is not using pads anymore. They're using menstrual cups. And in countries like Sweden, I believe there are hospital trucks that go around collecting this blood so that stem cells can be retrieved from it and given to patients of cancer and people to save them.
Yes.
There is no blood that is heavier with stem cells. If we start educating people about this, if we start saying that this is not dirty and that women were asked to rest because they were renewing their internal cells that would later make them become mothers, and that it was not saying, oh, you are dirty, therefore you cannot touch anything, oh, you are dirty. Well, if menstruation is dirty, then the human race is dirty.
Yeah. In fact, I was reading something very interesting. You'd written the menstruation is dirty, then the whole human race is dirty, because without menstruation, there would be no pregnancy. It really makes you think. So
Absolutely.
I think,
Absolutely.
I'm considering we're in the 21st century. Okay, talking, Mallika, about Darpana, tell us, what is Darpana doing when we talk about gender sensitization? Because you have been doing a lot of work.
Everything from language to the color coding of so-called educators, in fact, lead you straight into the same silo of this is what girls do and this is what boys do. And in Darpana, we have actually gone and sat in classrooms of schools which consider themselves very enlightened and videoed behavior where the teacher doesn't even realize she's being gendered, where the books are all properly done, but girls are still in pink and boys are still in blue. And the great Indians on the walls are 99% male.
Yeah.
And things like that. So we have been doing quite a lot of research and seeing how our programming can break those particular things in children who are very young. Because again, research shows that 3-year-olds do not see a difference in gender. By the time they are 5, they're already seeing gender differences, so that a boy gets labeled strong and a girl gets labeled beautiful. So you need to start younger and younger, because younger and younger our children are prone to be looking at social media, which is hugely gendered.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's just from the beginning, like boys can't cry, or girls are beautiful. I mean, the way you said it, I mean, these are things actually, and the change can happen. It's just about thinking.
Oh, yes.
I
It's
mean,
a question of messaging. It's a
messaging.
question of,
Yeah. In fact, Mallika, mostly people view, when we talk about dance coming back as a form of art, mostly people view art as a form of entertainment, a hobby. How do you think we can use it in the same way as we use STEM fields to bring about a change?
Darpana has done a lot of work in using the arts to talk about things as different as how to handle diabetes, to why a girl child must have an education, to gender-based violence, to environmental destruction, and to many of these. And we have tried every form of the arts. We don't go in saying, I am a dancer, therefore we will use dance for this. We see what is the messaging and who are the people that need that messaging and what is it that will go.
Talking about COVID-19, the pandemic has impacted each one of us in different ways. I mean, in fact, every aspect of life. What about the art industry, and what more could be done so that it bounces back post the pandemic?
It was pretty difficult before the pandemic as well, not for the visible people like me, but when you talk of a dance performance, you are not thinking of the metalsmith who made the ghungroos, who will go out of a job and will starve because the ghungroos are no longer in demand. You are not thinking of the weaver who is weaving Kanjivaram saris and her loom is going to shut down. You are not thinking of the leather maker who no longer has a demand for the mridangams and the talavadya kacheri instruments. We are only thinking of the person who comes in front of an audience. There are hundreds of things that lead up, and that whole industry is in dire straits. India has never had a consistent policy to support the arts, and there are all these amazing groups lying in far-flung places who are doing bhavai, who are doing yatra, who are doing yakshagana, in some village who have no support at all. And where are the patrons? The new crororepatis are not patrons. The government is not a patron. The temples are no longer patrons. There are no rajas. So who is supporting the arts? COVID made it much worse, but the arts were in pretty bad state even then.
And I think, like you rightly said, it's not just the artists. In terms of impact, Mallika, how do you see your own choreographies around social issues affecting your audience as well as your students from your academy?
Somebody was asking me the other day what we teach in Darpana. And I said, through the arts, we teach human beings to be humane beings. We teach them their roots, and we teach them that the branches can go anywhere they want. I think the very fact that I am still being asked by colleges, schools, younger audiences to go and perform, to talk to them, means that there is a possibility that my kind of work is having an impact.
Thank you so much for giving us your time.